Every veteran has a story to tell. This is Doug Jenkins' story. His diary begins in Vietnam in 1968. He was an F-4 pilot.
In December 1968, I was crewed up with Vince Scott, a young lieutenant who had just recently arrived at Da Nang. I've seldom, if ever, seen or met a finer young man than Vince. Soon after we were crewed, I made Vince a rash promise. I said, "You stick with me and I'll give you a landing for every takeoff." He smiled and said, "Such a deal."
For 6 months, Doug delivered on that promise, a landing for every takeoff. One day in April of '69, Vince was on a mission with someone else.
For some reason, that aircraft never pulled out of the bombing run. The aircraft went into the ground at 12 o'clock to the target, and there went my backseater.
Months later, Doug came home. He returned to his family, his career. But the war and Vince's memory would never really leave him. When his sons decided to follow him into the Air Force, that old diary found some new chapters. His youngest son, Dan, was in training, hoping for an appointment to the Air Force Academy.
While at Lackland for basic training, Dan decided to wear a bracelet honoring American servicemen missing in action. Not recognizing any of the names, he decided to buy one with a date of 1969 on it. Then he called me. He said, "Dad, I decided to wear a POWMIA bracelet." And he said, "Did you ever know a guy named Vincent C. Scott?" And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I said, "Dan, that was my backseater in Vietnam." And I pulled out my diary off the shelf, and I read him what I had written. 22 April 1969. Lieutenant Colonel Van Cleve and Vince Scott missing but feared dead when their aircraft ran into the top of a hill after failing to pull out after a weapons delivery pass.
Suddenly, the words of his past came to life again.
He must have been incredibly joyful right up to that last instant. I never really thought about the fact that Vince crashed into the side of a hill and that my son died on the side of a hill. That's almost too much to take in.
As Cadet Dan Jenkins was about to graduate from the Air Force Academy, he went to El Dorado Canyon to go climbing with a friend at the wind tower.
He fell about 40 feet. He was tethered, but he was just grievously injured. Dan passed away. He went to be with the Lord. And it was Easter Sunday.
The story began with the diary and continues with the words of a son, the son who wore the bracelet of a friend as he wrote a letter.
November 11th, 1993, Veterans Day. Dear Dad, good morning. Today, as you know, is Veterans Day. We, the Cadet Wing, have posted a 24-hour vigil around the flag to remember those who have given their lives for their country. I feel that I owe them all. But it is not just those who have given the ultimate sacrifice. It's also those who are still living and still doing the right thing for their country. Guys like you. Thanks for not being a slacker. Thanks for saying, "Yes, sir," when the time came to go off and fight in the conflict you may or may not have agreed with. Thank you for not quitting. I just wanted to recognize and thank you for doing some of the thankless things. That's what Veterans Day is for, isn't it? With any luck, I'll find I'm made of some of the same stuff that you are. I'm proud to be your son, Dad. Love, Dan.